Did the next PS5 firmware update just leak? We've got updates on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order 2 and Summer Games Fest, and Ghost of Tsushima just hit a huge sales milestone. That's right, it's time for the PlayStation news, so before we jump into it, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications set to all. So if you want to talk about a game that everyone was nervous for and then it came out and everyone absolutely loved it, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is definitely gotta be at the top of the list. EA really didn't do that game any favors when they announced it at E3. It was during one of their EA Play events. They literally just brought the microphone into the crowd and put it in front of Vince Zampella's face, and he was like, yeah, Respawn's working on a third-person action Star Wars game. We don't have anything to show from it, but we will soon. So obviously that set a weird tone for the game. I don't think that's gonna surprise anyone, and then over time, we hadn't heard anything about it. And then finally, we got a trailer and it looked awesome. The game came out and it was awesome. If you guys couldn't tell by my shirts and like the Legos behind me and stuff, I'm actually like a very big Star Wars fan. I just got this like Lego Millennium Falcon. Here's the instruction booklet. It's like a spiral bound book. So that's what I'm working on now. So it might surprise you guys to hear that I have played quite a few Star Wars video games, and Jedi Fallen Order is possibly, man, I can't believe I'm saying this. It possibly is my favorite Star Wars game. And when you consider what I just talked about, which is how weird the announcement for that game was, it's really surprising. I mean, even leading up to it, when I saw that Cameron Monaghan was playing Cal Kestis, I was a little surprised because he was like Joker on Gotham, and that's only really what I knew him from. And then when I played the game, all of that like skepticism melted away because it was so good. It was like a third-person action Metroidvania where it plays like Dark Souls, but it was just perfectly balanced with the difficulty. I played it all the way through on Jedi Knight mode. I had a ton of fun, and then it ends on this like minor cliffhanger, right? Like the game has closure, the story wraps up, and then it opens things up to have new adventures with this awesome cast of characters that really just got to know each other. I was super excited to see where it would go, and they announced a sequel pretty soon after, so I've been waiting on it, and it looks like we're not gonna have to wait that much longer because Jeff Grubb on his show GrubbSnax, he's like one of the biggest leakers around, said that we're going to see it announced at Star Wars Celebration or around then, so like this May, and then at the end of the year, the game's gonna release. It might be pushed to 2023, but as of now, it's looking like it's going to come out at the end of the year. And that's awesome because while that timing makes sense, I was actually getting kind of worried that it was going to be delayed to like late 2023, just because so many games are getting delayed by years at this point, like we just saw with Final Fantasy 16. But knowing how well the first game came out and the short turnaround time that they had on it, I'm really excited to see where they're going to take these characters next. I don't even know what I would want them to expand on because the gameplay was so tight in the first game. Maybe they'll have some more open worldy type areas or some more refined puzzles. I would like to see it keep going right where it left off. I don't want to get too close to episode 4. I really like the time period where it is. There's just so many different things about this game that I'm excited for. And the coolest part about all this is that this isn't the only Star Wars game in development right now because EA no longer has the license. We have this one to look forward to. We have Star Wars Eclipse, which seems like it's going to be out in 2027. So I'm not going to get too hyped for that one just yet. But we also have this massive game, Ubisoft Massive, that's going to be apparently like the Division 2, but in the Star Wars universe. Sign me up for that. I want that more than anything. And then on top of it all, we're getting a full-on remake of Knights of the Old Republic. And that's one where I'm like 90% there in terms of excitement. I like that the team working on it has actually worked on the first game. They're like ex-BioWare people. I also like that Aspyr has ported Knights of the Old Republic to pretty much every device out there. So hopefully they know the first game inside and out. The one thing bugging me is that I guess the writer has said that they don't like Knights of the Old Republic. Like they've tweeted before that their favorite Star Wars game definitely isn't Knights of the Old Republic. So I get it. People's tastes can change over time, but if you're working on one of the biggest Star Wars games ever and you're remaking it and you know you have to get it right because it's canon now, why would you even mess around and hire someone to write it who doesn't like the original game? I don't want major changes to this story, you know? Like, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt for now because the good outweighs the bad, but hopefully they're taking people's criticisms and feedback about the writer choice into consideration and they don't let too many changes happen. But yeah, that brings me to my next news story, which is that Summer Games Fest is definitely happening this year, which is great. It's really been a lot different lately because E3 is not in person anymore. Everyone is expecting it to be in person this year, but it was actually just announced today today that it's going to be online again as well. And Summer Games Fest really came about because it was supposed to be a replacement for the in-person E3, and then E3 was going to happen this year, so people were kind of unsure. But no, again, it is happening for sure. And knowing that we're possibly getting the reveal for Jedi Fallen Order 2 at Star Wars Celebration at the end of May, it would be awesome to see the full gameplay reveal at Summer Games Fest. I know EA would probably want to show some gameplay off at their own EA Play event, but that's usually like way at the end of the summer, so I'm not going to want to wait that long after I have the like CGI announcement trailer at Star Wars Celebration. I want to have a quick follow-up with some awesome gameplay. I know people like to come down on him, but I personally really like what Jeff Keighley does. I like the Game Awards as a whole for the announcements. I wish they could figure out how to make the actual awards being given out feel more important, but he does get some really cool stuff there. I still remember when the Death Stranding director's cut was announced, they used Metal Gear Solid music in the trailer. That got me really hyped. There's a ton of different moments like that from the Game Awards that get me excited, so I'm glad that he's sticking around with Summer Games Fest, because another thing you got to consider is that games don't really come out in the summer, so having games to be excited about while they're not coming out is cool. If you want to talk about what should really come back, I'm going to say PlayStation Experience. I was at the one where The Last of Us Part 2 was announced, and that was one of the coolest experiences of my life. They also announced the Uncharted Horde mode at one of them and let people like play it live, so all my buddies and I got on like all these different PS4s and played the Uncharted Horde mode together, which was super fun. And my best PlayStation Experience memory is getting to play Resident Evil 7 early in VR, and then it made me like so motion sick that I was sweating and I was like about to throw up, but I powered through the demo and I was like, that was awesome. That was so good. That was so good. And then I ran out of the room and threw up in a trash can. So yeah, I'd really like PlayStation Experience to come back because I have so many great memories there, like throwing up in a trash can. All right, so now we got to talk about this huge sales milestone for Ghost of Tsushima, because it starts simple and it gets crazy. So the first part of this story is that Ghost of Tsushima, the PS4 and PS5 versions combined, have sold around 8 million copies. Before we get into the whole thing, that's great. It's a new IP. People really enjoyed it. And I remember leading up to it, everyone was kind of unsure on whether or not it was going to live up to Sucker Punch's legacy. You know, it's a new game for them, it's a new IP, it's totally different from Infamous, but it came out and it was dope. And then they also released that sweet Legends mode, which was like a multiplayer co-op thing that even had a raid. Ghost of Tsushima on its own, incredible achievement there. The controversy started when a tweet, which was made by Game Informer that praised the game for hitting a tremendous milestone, was quote retweeted by the director of Days Gone, Jeff Ross. Now, Ross actually left the studio a while ago with some people who had been there for a really long time, and no one really knew why, because Days Gone, even though the reviews weren't great at launch, ended up selling a lot of copies and got people really excited about a sequel, because I don't know if you guys know this, it ends on a huge cliffhanger. And then last year we found out the reason these people all left is because they actually pitched Days Gone 2 to Sony, and Sony said no because the critic scores were too low on Days Gone, and then they had Ben's studio work on the multiplayer mode for The Last of Us for a while, and also Uncharted 5 with San Diego Studio. Obviously that was a huge waste of Ben's time, so after a year and a half of doing that, they pitched a new IP to Sony and Sony greenlit it, but the frustrating thing there is that they lost so much key talent in this process. It's good they got back on track, but they lost a ton of key talent. That's the bad part. And things just got crazier. So let's go back to that tweet from Jeff Ross. I'm going to read it now. It says, at the time I left Sony, Days Gone had been out for a year and a half, around the same amount of time that Ghost of Tsushima's been out, and it sold 8 million copies. It's since gone on to sell more, and then 1 million plus on Steam. Local studio management always made us feel like it was a big disappointment. Now, I've seen a ton of articles that are blaming Sony for saying it's a disappointment, but he's very clear that it's local studio management. So Bend Studios higher-ups always made them, the people working on the game, feel like it's a disappointment, which is crazy because in the same-ish amount of time, it managed to sell the same amount of copies as Ghost of Tsushima, and I guarantee you the budget of $60 million on Days Gone was far less than it was in Ghost of Tsushima. Now, you guys got to remember that not only was Days Gone Bend Studios' first open world game, it was also their first non-portable game in a really long time. Before that, they had worked on stuff like Resistance Retribution, which is great, and Uncharted Golden Abyss, which is better than the first game. But then they moved on to a huge open world PS4 games with hordes of zombies. And then you consider that the team that made the open world in Days Gone was only 6 people, and all this stuff starts stacking on top of itself to make you realize that this game actually is a pretty big achievement, and it kind of explains why these people left Sony. Now, the unfortunate thing here is that the argument that keeps boiling down is whether or not Days Gone is as good as Ghost of Tsushima, and I hate that argument because they're not really comparable. They're both open world third-person action games, but if you like zombies, Days Gone is obviously the better option. And if you like samurai stuff, Ghost of Tsushima is the better option. It doesn't matter, right? Like, that's not the point here. The point here is that one studio made a game and sold 8 million copies of it and was treated like a disappointment, and another studio created a game and sold 8 million copies of it, and now they're getting a movie deal and they're definitely getting a sequel. And the biggest disappointment of all here is that we heard over the summer that Sony cares more about Metacritic scores than sales, and this basically proves it, and that just sucks because there's so many games out there where critics and fans don't align. And if you have Sony sitting there saying the critic scores are the only things that matter, I just feel like that's a business model that's destined to fail eventually. Like, I'm not saying critics are always wrong, but there are plenty of games that I ignored reviews on and went and played, like Days Gone, that I absolutely loved at the end of the day. That game is so underrated, and I feel like the more people play it, the more you see people saying, yeah, this game's awesome. Now that it runs at 60 frames per second and 4K on the PS5, I can finally appreciate it for what it is, and it's incredible. So on the one hand, I'm kind of bummed that Ghost of Tsushima's time in the sun was taken away because it's not their fault that Sony didn't greenlight a sequel to Days Gone, but on the other hand, I'm glad that this blew up so big and that people are really talking about it, because hopefully Sony realizes that critic scores aren't the most important thing in the world. Alright, so if you made a list right now of the 2 things that PlayStation fans want the most, the first one is obviously a PS5 because no one can get them, but the second is a new firmware update for that PS5. Because towards the end of the fall, Sony came out with a really good update that added a lot of the features people wanted, like installing a new SSD into your PS5, but it's missing some critical features that would just round out the entire experience. And thankfully, we finally have some hints on when that could be coming. So the biggest feature people really want with a PS5 firmware update is the ability to play in 1440p and with variable refresh rate. I've explained it a million times on this channel. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but variable refresh rate basically eliminates screen tearing, and 1440p is a great resolution because most of the games that the PlayStation 5 runs in 4K are basically just upscaled from 1440p. So it sucks that if you plug your PS5 into a 1440p monitor, it downscales to 1080p. Like, who wants that? So the latest rumor we've heard about all this is that the reason we haven't seen it yet is that Sony, who also makes other consumer electronics, wants to time this firmware update with their new launch of their brand new TVs. And we had an industry insider say that last year, and most recently we had a YouTube channel called HD Test say the exact same thing. So that seems like it's probably the case because Sony, obviously, they're coming out with a new TV. They want to advertise a huge new feature that makes it perfect for the PS5. That makes a lot of sense to me, and it also is backed up by the fact that we know Sony's answer to Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X is their own proprietary version of it that's coming to the PS5 that only works on Bravia TV. So the reason you would want something like Dolby Vision on your PS5 versus just regular old HDR is that HDR looks at the whole game and says, all right, these are the best settings that I can think of for basically any scenario in the entire game. Whereas Dolby Vision, or the Sony counterpart, will color each frame and you'll get the best possible experience. So it's actually a good feature that you would want. The frustrating thing there is that Sony's using their own proprietary thing instead of Dolby Vision, which means you again have to have it on a Sony TV, and Sony TVs are expensive. There's actually quite a big range of TVs that are going to support their version of it. But yeah, it's super frustrating that it looks like they're doing it the same way with variable refresh rate, where they're going to come up with their own new terminology for something that's available on pretty much every other device out there so that it only works on Sony Bravia TVs. Now, it could be worse. Sony TVs are apparently pretty good. I just don't like that you have to get locked into their ecosystem. That's one of the worst things about having an iPhone. You need an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac to really take advantage of the entire thing. I see what Sony's doing here. They're going to streamline the entire thing. Hopefully, maybe even make the TVs kind of look like the PS5's visual design. I think that's cool. Just give me another option in addition to that, right? Like, if I want a Sony TV, I can go get these features that Sony makes, but if I have a TV with Dolby Vision, I should be able to use Dolby Vision. Or if I have a TV that supports variable refresh rate, I should be able to just use that and not Sony's proprietary version of it. It's just like the most Sony thing ever, because when you look back at the Vita, that's what killed it. Sony not using SD cards or micro SD cards and just at the last second deciding to use their own dumb little memory card that was was way overpriced because they were scared of the console getting hacked, which happened anyway. And then my pie in the sky wish would be something sort of similar to Quick Resume. It doesn't work as well as it's supposed to on the Xbox Series X, but basically you can save state your Series X games, your Xbox One games, your original Xbox games, your 360 games, and then you can go back, even if you turn the console all the way off months later, and you'll be exactly where you left off, which is obviously a cool feature. And it's super annoying that the PS5 has no real form of multitasking. Like if you switch from Ghost of Tsushima's director's cut over to Netflix, it basically quits Ghost of Tsushima. So I would really like Sony to figure out a way to not only copy Microsoft in this department, but do it better, because again, Quick Resume does not work all that well. It breaks Halo Infinite, which is apparently like the flagship game of the Xbox Series X. You could like not get multiplayer cosmetics from the single player if you use Quick Resume. So Sony's like, yeah, we waited so long to do it because these jokers haven't figured it out yet. That'd be sweet. But yeah, like I said, we're probably going to see this new firmware update around spring. So if there's any features you want to see come along with it, make sure you let me know down in the comments. Anyway, guys, that's all the PlayStation news I have for you today. Make sure you again let me know what you think down in the comments below, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.